I work in a fascinating field. I've spent a good chunk of the past 20 years measuring the digital world. It's a lot of fun. And part of what makes it fun is that we've had to learn how to do it on the fly. And it keeps changing, so we never get all that good at it. I like that. But why should you care about measuring the digital world? It's pretty simple, really. These days, most of us spend a big part of our lives inside the digital world. And if we want to make that world better, more engaging, more convenient, more efficient, then we have to learn how to measure it. Measurement is the first step to understanding, and understanding is the key to improvement. I recently wrote a book called Measuring the Digital World. In it, I tried to capture what I've learned about digital analytics as a discipline. Not every trick or tip, not how to run reports or format information in a visually pleasing style, not the difference between a monthly unique and a weekly unique, but how digital analytics actually works. I can't take you through the whole thing in this video, of course, so I plan to give you a little taste. Maybe no more than an amuse-bouche, but enough to whet your palate and give you a better sense of what digital analytics is and how it works. Let's get started. Measurement is fundamental to understanding. We measure everything, all the time, constantly. In the physical world, we come pre-wired with a powerful set of evolutionarily proven techniques for understanding our environment and optimizing it. Height, weight, motion, velocity, color, the list goes on and on. We have an incredibly rich assortment of measurement techniques and language that's trivially at our disposal for describing the world. But here's the thing. In the digital world, all that stuff goes out the window. In the digital world, there's no such thing as height or weight or velocity. In the digital world, we're totally dependent on our tools to be our eyes and ears and hands. And those tools aren't that great. What they record is really nothing more than a series of flashes. We see this piece of content getting downloaded, then this, then that, then this, then that. We lack any real foundation for using this stuff. Remember the Matrix? Inside the Matrix, there was a rich experience, something that felt exactly like reality, except for the occasional Mr. Smith. But outside the Matrix, what you saw was a cascading stream of digits. To understand what's happening, you can't focus on the digits. You have to understand the experience from the inside. That's true across the board for measuring the digital world. Most of the metrics we get from our tools don't help understand that experience. They tell us about the outside. This page was downloaded 10,000 times, not the inside. This user read this and was annoyed or entertained. Open up a digital analytics tool, and you'll get reports about the number of visits to your website, the top pages viewed, the campaigns that source those visits. It's just not that interesting. These metrics are really only good for understanding the digital property, but that's not what we want. We aren't trying to understand websites when we measure the digital world. We're trying to understand experiences. So if you've been trying to use a typical digital analytics tool and been stymied on how to get anything interesting out of it, it's not your fault. And cheer up. I'm not trying to sell you a new tool. I'm going to give you a method for using the tools we have with a very different idea. To understand at the most basic level how measuring the digital world works, I'm going to introduce my old pal, Conan the librarian. Conan's wandered in off the desert, and he's checking out books in digital land. Since he can't read, all he knows is how many books each patron checks out. And since Conan is a good guy and wants the library to succeed, he tries to get people to check out more books. If you think about it, Conan's view is a lot like the web measurement view we get from our tools. We know how many pages someone looked at, but that doesn't really tell us a lot. And all we can do with it is to try to get visitors to look at more. But suppose Conan hangs out at the library long enough and he learns to read. His view of the world changes dramatically. See how different everything looks now? When Conan understands what people are consuming instead of just how much, his understanding of them and their potential needs is vastly greater. Our light reader is knocking off War and Peace and the Red and the Black. Heavy stuff. And our heavy reader is getting children's books. Not only does Conan have a much better sense of what people might want to read, making his recommendations dramatically better, we're talking personalization here, but he can even guess things about the people. He can see that one patron is a college student and that another has a young child. It's the same for digital. If someone views a page on 529 plans, not only do we infer that they're interested in 529s, we think they probably have children. When someone clicks on a screen size facet of 70 inches and above, we assume they're looking to purchase a really big TV. When someone reads a detailed article on Bernie Sanders' plan for tuition reform, we assume they're interested in politics. We may suspect they like Sanders, and we may guess that they're young. That's how it works. This simple and obvious lesson is central to understanding how digital measurement works. We understand people by understanding what they choose to consume, which leads us, in turn, to a recognition that the more we understand about the content consumed, the better job we can do at measurement. Sure, you've probably always thought about page names when it comes to websites, but if understanding behavior means understanding content, then taxonomy is the first and most important job for an analyst. For a librarian, there are many, many dimensions that might make sense, and I've listed some here. Notice that book title is not the be-all and end-all, or probably even the most useful. For a digital property, there's a lot of similar kinds of variables. But there is no definitive guide to describing content. Every site will have a different taxonomy, and every analysis may require you to at least consider whether your existing categorizations make sense. There's a whole chapter in my book devoted to thinking about content description and taxonomy. It's one of the most important and least practiced parts of good digital measurement. Taxonomy's boring. It's all guts, no glamour. But you can't do good digital measurement without it. In fact, these content descriptions are essential to understanding visitors in the digital world. We use them in particular for building segmentations. Segmentation is critical to analysis, in digital and elsewhere. It's the single largest, most fundamental, most important piece of measuring the digital world. In fact, you could pretty much describe my book, Measuring the Digital World, as about how to do digital segmentation. And here's the thing. Digital segmentation is a little different. Not only is it driven by content consumption, but it's also a segmentation that's nearly always performed along two dimensions. Think about it this way. If I walk into your office and tell you, website traffic is up by 5,000 visitors, the first question I expect you to ask is, who are those visitors? If I can't answer that question, I haven't told you much. Are they customers, prospects, students, accidental clickers? It makes a difference. But even if I know who those visitors are, I still need to know why they were on the website. Most enterprise websites and mobile applications have a lot of different functions: branding, selling, information, building relationships, answering questions, routing people to the right place, and so on. Every single one of those functions is distinct. Your website can be great at one and terrible at another. That's why there is no one right answer to a question like, is our website good? In fact, that's the wrong question. The right question is always something like, is our website good for this kind of customer trying to accomplish this particular task? Until you're talking about your digital properties that way, you're not thinking intelligently about digital. Digital segmentation is nearly always two-tiered. It involves figuring out who people are and what they're trying to accomplish. And you do that nearly always by analyzing the content people consume. So the most basic principle of measuring the digital world is this. We understand what's happening in digital by understanding the content choices people make. Simple, right? Well, yes and no, because not only is building that understanding from behavior hard, it turns out there's a built-in problem in digital analytics that lives in every website and complicates every measurement we make. To understand this problem, I like to use a map of my home city, San Francisco. If you visit San Francisco, you'll probably want to see the Golden Gate Bridge. Hey, it's worth it, at least on a clear day. I don't encourage you to bother when the fog is in. It's cold out there. But picture San Francisco as a website and getting to the Golden Gate Bridge a success. If you look at the map, you'll see there's really only two roads to the bridge from San Francisco. One cuts along the bay, and the other goes due north through the Presidio. So if we thought of roads as pages, those two roads are going to be highly correlated with success. Nearly every visitor who gets to the Golden Gate will take one of those two roads. What's more, you can see that the relationship of every other road to success will be largely determined by where people are starting from and how close that road is to the two main roads that lead to the bridge. Websites are just the same. Like a city, they have a structure. Visitors are given a limited set of links, the roads connecting any page, and those links are placed and sized very differently. So just like a city, a website has highways, boulevards, major streets, side streets, and even dead ends. This structure has a huge impact on how visitors navigate your digital properties. And of course, it also has a big impact on the way your websites appear to work. When you first open up digital data to statisticians who aren't used to working with this kind of data, you'll almost always get some really bad analysis. I've seen smart analysts make some incredibly stupid mistakes when they're analyzing digital data for the first time. Stuff like, viewing 5+ pages is highly correlated with success, when it takes 5 pages to navigate your funnel. Or, page X is highly correlated with success, when page X is the only one with an order link. No one would ever make these kinds of mistakes with map data, but people tend not to think of digital worlds as, well, worlds. They are. They have a structure, and that structure influences behavior. What's more, it's meant to, and this is important. While you're busily trying to figure out what it means when people view a page, someone else is busily trying to force visitors to consume that very page. So here's digital measurement's second law. Structure has a huge influence on consumption. And the first law, it's not absolute. In measuring the digital world, I spend whole chapters explaining ways that you, as an analyst, can try to control for structure, from factoring in website topology to running A/B tests to building your own controlled experiments. Handling structure is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to measuring the digital world. And by the way, if you're not an analyst, but just getting information about a digital property, keep this one in mind. 9 out of every 10 times, the reporting and analysis you get isn't taking account of the inherent structures in digital, meaning it's, well, garbage. But the constant balancing act between understanding behavior based on consumption versus controlling for the structure of digital properties and their influence on that consumption isn't the only big challenge to digital measurement. Part of what makes digital so hard is that nearly all the meaning in consumption isn't at the level of a single event. To really understand what happened, to build our segmentations, to decide how well a digital experience worked, we nearly always need to understand a customer's journey. That's very different than traditional analysis. I've covered these next few slides in some detail in my presentations on big data, so if you've seen those, just skip ahead to slide 23. If you haven't, here's the deal. Most analysis we do is based on traditional row-column data, where the unit of meaning lives at the row level. We have something like a customer record, and we're analyzing customers. And it doesn't matter how many records we have. It doesn't matter how many different data sources feed these records. And it doesn't matter how fast those fields change. It's still just analyzing single rows of data. Digital isn't like that. Digital is big data. I often describe digital as a paradigm case of big data. And what I mean by that is nothing more nor less than that to understand digital data, you have to create meaning at a level above each individual event. That meaning comes from the sequence, time, and pattern of events. Does this sound basic? It isn't. It makes a big difference in the type of tools we need, and even more, in the analytic methods we'll use. Here's an example of how sequence matters. Customer sees an ad, visits the website, calls, and then enrolls. Voila, success! But in example 2, we have exactly the same events, just in a different order. It makes a huge difference, right? Our interpretation isn't based simply on the events being present, but on the order of the events themselves. Time has a huge impact on digital too. Here, not only are the events identical, but so is their sequence. We interpret them differently because of the amount of time between each event. We'll often credit a campaign with success when there's a 7-day lag between the impression and the conversion. Not so much when it's an 11-month lag. Time in digital measurement matters, whether it's the time between pages, the time between visits, or the time between key events. In a way, sequence and time are just subsets of a broader theme in digital measurement, which is that the pattern of events is key to interpreting what happened. That pattern involves both sequence and time and can be simple or quite complex. Here in this example, the presence or absence of a call after a web visit is critical to understanding whether the web visit was a success. That's quite common in customer support applications. There's a lot of other examples. For instance, when someone searched on your website, whether it was early or late in their visit, has a huge impact on how you interpret their behavior. Similarly, when someone goes from a router page to a product page and then immediately bounces back, it's a behavior we call pogo sticking, it tells you something about whether or not they found what they expected. Patterns are everywhere in digital measurement, and that's a big challenge because most of our tools aren't really designed to find patterns. The importance of sequence, time, and pattern break all sorts of analytic and IT paradigms. Relational models in SQL don't do so well when you introduce time, sequence, and pattern to your queries. That's why relational performance nearly always stinks when it comes to real digital analytics. What's more, many of your classic stats methods, things like correlation, factor analysis, and regression, they aren't the key tools when it comes to this kind of journey analysis. So your analysts are often out to sea when it comes to handling digital data. And to put the cherry on the indigestion cake, joins are really challenging when it comes to this type of streamed event data. SQL, stats tools, joins, that's pretty much the core of our traditional data and analytics world. So if they're all broken with digital, no wonder it's hard. So digital's third law, and the challenge that I spend the last few chapters of Measuring the Digital World trying to address, is that some of the basic tools and techniques for analysis change. They change not because it's digital, but because of the requirement to understand meaning in a sequence of events. The fundamental unit of meaning in digital is the visitor, but the fundamental unit of data is the event. And the process of inferring meaning from a stream of events is distinct and analytically challenging. There is a hidden benefit to this complexity, though. You've probably heard about omnichannel analytics. Most of us have to support digital and non-digital experiences, not to mention experiences across multiple types of digital. That's omnichannel. And it turns out that the types of analysis we've built for measuring a single digital experience can be beautifully extended to cover omnichannel as well. So there you have it. Digital measurement has 3 laws, and each is fundamental to what we do. The first, most basic, and most important, the principle that underlies everything we do in measuring the digital world, is that we understand people by understanding what they consume. This drives us to classify our content in new ways, to try and use it to maximize our ability to map from what people consume to who they are and what they're trying to accomplish. But of course, the world tends to make life difficult for analysts, and in digital, we're constantly battling between applications of that first law and the second, completely contrary fact that websites are designed and structured to force visitors down certain paths. So what they consume doesn't always tell us what they wanted. This push and pull is the complexity at the heart of digital analytics. And it doesn't end there, because the techniques necessary to resolve that conflict and to understand even the first law require us to work with data at a level above that of the event. And that doesn't mean aggregating it. We don't add up events. We analyze them in terms of their sequence, time, and pattern. That requires different tools and different ways of thinking than traditional stats folks or data scientists are used to. So measuring the digital world isn't easy, but it is important, and I hope you can see why I find it so fascinating. Thanks for hanging with me. I hope I've given you a little taste of my world and my book. There are no tips and tricks here, nothing about EVARs or custom events or referring sites. It's not that that stuff doesn't matter. It's just that it doesn't matter until you understand why and how you can use it to really measure the digital world. In my book, I lay out this foundation in far greater detail and work through a host of techniques for how you actually solve the problems that I've described here. Read it, and you'll have a deep conceptual understanding of how digital measurement works, what you need to get from your tools, what kinds of analysis actually make sense. You'll see what the discipline of digital measurement must involve, why it's hard, why it's interesting, and what problems we have left to tackle. I hope you'll give it a read.